It's been a while since I last used my Nintendo DS, but that's all about to change thanks to what I've got in this box. Inside this box is a DS Pico, an open source flash cart for the DS, DSi and 3DS consoles. It uses the RP2040 chip used in the Raspberry Pi Pico, which is presumably where the DS Pico name comes from. This particular DS Pico was priced at around $15 or £11, though I paid slightly less than this due to the use of a discount code. Inside the box you get a couple of stickers to put on the cartridge, a short micro USB cable, and of course the DS Pico cartridge itself. My DS Pico comes in a smoky black shell, which just happened to be the cheapest one at the time, but there are different colour options available, and you can also buy the housing separately if you want to change it later on. If you've got a 3D printer, you can also try printing your own housing, as L&H team have made the files available through their GitHub page. I do love the way you can see the inside of the cartridge and the Raspberry Pi RP2040 that powers it. It also makes it easier to see if there's a microSD card inserted. Before you can start using the DS Pico, there are a few setup steps you'll have to go through first. There'll be a guide linked in the description, which is the one that I'm following to get this DS Pico set up. The first thing you'll need to do is to make sure that the DS Pico firmware has been flashed onto the cartridge. Even though these will typically come pre-flashed, there are two different versions of the firmware, so it's a good idea to flash it yourself just to make sure that you've got the right one. If you've got an original DS, a DS Lite or a modded DSi or 3DS, you can use the hybrid firmware, and this is the one that's typically pre-flashed onto the cartridges. There's also a second, somewhat questionably named firmware, which works for unmodded DSi and 3DS systems. Note that this one is more complicated to set up, so you're probably better off modding your DSi or 3DS and using the hybrid firmware instead. Once you've downloaded the correct firmware, plug the DS Pico into your PC using the micro USB cable. You should then see a drive appear called RPI-RP2. And what you want to do is just drag and drop the firmware file you downloaded, which should end in .uf2, drag and drop that onto the RPI-RP2 drive, which should then disappear. And that's all there is to it. Once you've done that, assuming the drive disappears, that means that the cartridge has been flashed. And you can now unplug it and start setting up the microSD card. To start, connect your microSD card to the PC and make sure that it's formatted as FAT32. To check this, open Windows Explorer, click on the microSD card, click the Details pane in the top right corner, and check that the file system value says FAT32. If it doesn't, right-click the drive, click Format, choose FAT32 from the drop-down, and then click Start. Any data already on the microSD card will be deleted at this point, so make sure any valuable files have already been copied elsewhere. At the time of filming, the guide lists two different software options to choose from. I'm going to stick with the default Pico launcher option, as I imagine this is the one that most people will end up using. It is possible to go to the respective project pages and download Pico Launcher and Pico Loader separately, and in theory it should be pretty straightforward to do so. But unfortunately I was unable to get this to work. Fortunately, the guide includes what they're calling the Pico package, which is a downloadable zip folder which contains the two components already set up for you. Extract the files from the downloaded folder and copy the contents of the extracted folder onto the root of the microSD card. Once that's done, you'll probably want to put some games on there as well. I'm not going to go into detail about how to dump your DS games, But once you have acquired them, they need to go in a folder on the root of the microSD card called Games. I've already got a folder here on my PC called Games, which has all of my dump games already inside, so I'm just going to copy this over to the microSD card. That's the software done, so the microSD card can now be ejected from the PC. Plug the microSD card into the DS Pico cartridge, then plug the cartridge into the console. I'm going to be testing this on a Nintendo DS Lite. On turning the DS on, the game entry should show the DS Pico logo. Start the DS Pico application and you'll be met with this rather nice looking launcher. It will start at the root of the microSD card, so I'm going to go across and open the games folder to see the list of games. It's worth noting that at the time of recording, the touchscreen doesn't work using Pico Launcher, so you do have to use the face buttons to navigate the menu. There are a few different layout options available, which will allow you to change the sort direction, the flow direction of the game grid, and you can even swap the default grid layout to a list view if that's something you prefer. And that's all there is to it. Unless, of course, you wanted to explore a few of the more advanced options, which do involve editing the config file. If you want to change the look of Pico Launcher, it does support themes, and you'll find these on the page linked at the bottom of the guide, and I'll also put a link to it in the video description as well. As you can see, there's a pretty wide range of themes available, and just for testing, I decided to go with this rather fetching Windows XP inspired theme. Once the file's downloaded, extract the files and find the extracted folder. Copy the extracted folder, open up the Pico folder, and inside there you'll find a folder called Themes. This is where you'll need to paste the folder that you copied earlier. You'll notice there are a couple of themes here that were already included when we installed Pico Loader. At the time of filming, there's no way to change the theme directly from Pico Loader itself. Instead, you need to navigate back to the root of the microSD card, enter the Pico folder, and look for a file called settings.json. If you don't have this file, put the microSD card back into your DS Pico, start DS Pico, and it will generate the settings file for you. Find the setting called theme and replace the value with the name of the folder for the theme that you've just installed. And now we're back to the DS to test out the result. Oh, it's got the sound. I wasn't even expecting that. And yeah, I mean, it sure looks like Windows XP to me. If you're the creative type, you can have a go at making your own theme using the theme creator. There look to be quite a lot of settings here, but I'm not the creative type, as you might be able to tell from my videos, so I'll stick to using themes that other people have made. To enhance your theme even further, you can use Pico Cover to download game cover images onto your microSD card, which can then be displayed by Pico Launcher. Again, there's a link to this in the DS Pico guide, and this is probably the easiest thing to use we'll be looking at today. Click the Get Started button, followed by Browse for USB. Navigate to the root of your microSD card and click Select Folder. You'll be prompted to give access to the browser to edit files on the microSD card. We want the browser to do this, so click Allow. It should then list all of the ROMs that have been found on the microSD card. Click the Start Processing button to start downloading the covers. Don't worry if you see one error, as it's probably just for the Pico boot launcher, which obviously doesn't have a cover. Back to the console now, and if we open the games folder, and yes, I found out it is now possible to use the touchscreen, unlike what I might have said earlier. You'll notice how on the top screen we can now see the game cover. How it displays will vary slightly depending on the theme you're using, but if you look back in the video, you'll see that these covers weren't there before. Another feature of the DS Pico with Pico Loader is the ability to run emulators. Now you've got to bear in mind that this is still a Nintendo DS, you're not going to be running PS3 games on it, but you will be able to run things like Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. I decided to test out the original Game Boy as you don't need the BIOS file for it. Again, as with everything else with Pico Launcher and the DS Pico, you just have to download the required packages and put them into the correct location on the microSD card. In this case, we need to open the microSD root, navigate inside the Pico folder and create a new folder called Emulators. We need to copy the downloaded emulator file into this folder. Whenever you're setting up emulators, you need to add file associations to the settings.json file, which was found in the Pico folder. You should just be able to copy and paste the section of JSON given on the setup guide into settings.json under the file associations key, and you should end up with something that looks similar to what I've got here, though of course it will be a little bit different if you're setting up a different emulator. Going back to the microSD root, create a new folder called ROMs, and inside this, create a folder called GB. And I'm just copying in some of the ROMs from my backed up Game Boy cartridges into this folder. Back once again to the Nintendo DS, and you might notice a bit of extra hardware on the right hand side because these are really my own game dumps. So there we go, there's the game booting. I couldn't actually find where my ROM dumps were for my Game Boy games, which is why I've got this out, because I had to make some new ones. One last feature I'm going to mention is the ability to run DSiWare. Now, as you've already seen multiple times in this video, I have a DS Lite, not a DSi. So I can't actually show this in action, but a quick look through the tutorial, it's basically just the same thing again, downloading some files to the microSD card, putting them in the right location, and then you should be good to go. So I think that's pretty much it, and this has turned out to be a much longer video than I originally thought it was going to be. But even during the process of making this, there have already been more improvements, more features, a great example being the touch functionality. And it looks like there's a lot of active development going on, so we might have additional functionality in the future. It's also pretty easy to set up, it's just a lot of copying and pasting files into the correct locations, and even then a lot of it's pre-packaged to make things as simple as possible. I'm particularly excited at the fact I can finally play my old Game Boy games on something with a backlit screen that doesn't do a load of filtering and post-processing, and really looks more like the game would have done playing it on original hardware. Now there are different versions of these available. You can also find some that have a USB Type-C port rather than micro USB, though the Type-C port is thicker, so the case design will be slightly different on those. You can find there'll be lots of different colour shells, and you can even buy the shells separately if you want to change colour later on. And all of the files are open source, so you can even have a go at making one yourself. I was originally planning to do that, but when I looked into the cost of doing it, it turned out that just buying a pre-made one seemed like the better option, particularly given that I'd end up wanting to buy the shell anyway, because there's no way I'm going to be able to 3D print something with that sort of quality, and of course I'd also have to buy the all-important sticker to finish off the cartridge. And speaking of which, I think a good way to end the video will be finally putting the sticker onto the cartridge. So I've gone with the sticker with the DS Pico logo on it. as I think I much prefer that to the other one. The only problem now is I've got to try and line this up the best I can, and I'm probably going to make a total mess of this on camera. So I think that looks about right. It's not too bad anyway. So yeah, I'm going to go for that. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, so I think that looks alright. But why don't you guys let me know in the comments what you make of my sticker application skills?